Welcome to Self-Centered Living, a podcast that serves as a vital platform for women of color across cultures and backgrounds to take charge of our narratives and where our voices are centered. I'm your host, Trish, and here we delve into our diverse experiences and rich humanity through a blend of personal stories and insightful discussions with a range of guests. Our aim is to foster meaningful connections and understanding among our listeners. This season, we're exploring the scripts that shape us, the ones we inherited, the ones that were imposed, and the ones that want to emerge when we can finally see them. Welcome back. Today we're exploring inherited scripts. I got my first car right before graduating from university. It was a black Honda Accord LX two-door coupe, cream leather interior. On replay was Mary J. Blige's Be Happy and Brandy's I Wanna Be Down, including the remix with MC Lyte, Queen Latifah, and Yo-Yo. Independence never sounds so good. I did not have to beg a ride from my father to get from A to B, and I could choose whether or not to take the subway. I could go where I wanted, when I wanted. Even better, I could scoop up my girls and we could hit the city or take the occasional out of town road trip. It felt like freedom. Until it didn't. Because for the next 3 years, I had a car note to contend with on a teacher's salary. The globetrotting I thought would be the hallmark of my life, proof of a life well lived and explored, adventure, was eclipsed by the monthly car payment and the insurance bill that came with it. Never mind the club money that instead went to gas, maintenance, and the day-to-day upkeep of owning something. When I moved abroad for a couple of years, my black Honda Accord came with me, along with the associated expenses, which meant my apartment, although I loved it, it was the size of a matchbox. Owning that car in many ways kept me grounded at a time when I should have taken flight. Found out through travel and exploration who I was and what I was really made for. Undoubtedly, the trajectory of my life would have been different. And yet, that car note prepared me for the expensive graduate school, and graduate school prepared me for the eventual mortgage that came with home ownership. One step led to the next, each one feeling like progress. Each one adding a new layer of obligation. I didn't question it, not for years, because the script was clear. You own things, you build, you acquire. That's how you make it. That's how you prove you've arrived. For many communities who labored and fought for what has been denied and deliberately kept out of their reach, land and home ownership have been paramount to building generational wealth. Ownership has meant dignity, it has meant stability, it has meant having something to pass down, setting up the generations to follow. Consider the moment we find ourselves in, when the very freedoms that were fought for are being actively dismantled. More recently, the Voters' Rights Act has been gutted by the highest court in our country. Protections that generations bled for are gone. So when I say I'm rethinking the ownership script, I want you to understand the weight of that. The guilt that comes with questioning something aimed at improving the lives of an entire people who suffered long and hard, and that is still operating for that very purpose. Along with the guilt is the desire to want to be the solution, the one who makes things better, who has a leg up. To question that script can feel like betrayal, like ingratitude, like abandoning the very people whose sacrifice made your life possible. Still, I have to ask, what is freedom? I am actively interrogating what I have assumed and adopted, including standards established by those who enslave and exploit. Mostly, I'm feeling into what freedom means to me at this very stage of my life. I'm not dismissing ownership. There is nothing freeing about paying exorbitant rent in a housing market that pushes people out of their communities and requires multiple jobs just to keep a roof over your head. But I am investigating whether I'm trading one master for another. Whether the script that was survival for one generation has become a cage for the next, and whether I have the courage to define freedom on my own terms. Freedom that for me is a version of being able to pick up and go when and where I choose and not burdening my only child with stuff. Stuff to figure out how to maintain and what to offload when I'm no longer here. I can choose to give in life. I want you to consider the inherited scripts in your life. I want you to think about the first big thing you were supposed to want. Maybe it was the car. Maybe it was the house. Maybe it was the degree. Maybe it was the wedding. Something that was presented to you not as a choice, but as a milestone. Proof that you were doing it right, that you had arrived, that your family's investment in you was paying off. You got it. And it didn't feel the way it was supposed to. Or maybe it did, for a while. And then the weight of maintaining it quietly replaced the joy of achieving it. The script told you what to want. It didn't tell you what it might cost, or simply that you might outgrow it. I'll give you another one. Reflect on how you work. Not what you do, how you do it. The pace you keep, the standards you hold, the way you respond when someone questions your competence. Where did that come from? Maybe your mother worked 2 jobs and never complained. Maybe your father measured love in what he provided. Maybe someone in your family said, or didn't have to say, that you had to be twice as good, and you absorbed that. Not as advice, as wiring. You were wired for excellence. You've been running that program so long it feels like your personality. You may even refer to yourself proudly as type A or a perfectionist. The goal is expertise and, above all, mastery. On their own, they are not at all bad. But what if it originates from a script that keeps you playing someone else's game? Let's go a little further. Think about the things you're loyal to that you never examined. A religion, a political party, a neighborhood, a way of eating, of celebrating, of mourning, of being in relationship and with whom. A belief about who your people are and what they do and don't do. Not the loyalty itself. Loyalty can be beautiful. But have you ever asked whether your loyalty is chosen or inherited? Whether you're there because you belong or because you're leaving would feel like turning your back on everything that got you here. That's the thing about inherited scripts. Characteristic of inherited scripts is something that was passed down to you from your family, your culture, your community, that you live by as if you chose it. But you didn't. It was given to you, often with love, often out of survival. It became part of how you operate in a world without you ever deciding it. Inherited scripts are not instructions someone handed you on a piece of paper. They're the water you swam in. The things that were so normal, so assumed, so much part of the air you breathed that questioning them never occurred to you. They can show up as values, as reflexes, as reactions, as a voice in your head that says, "This is just who I am," or "This is how we do things." The thing is, it's tricky. It's complex. These scripts are not the enemy. Many of them were acts of love. Many of them kept your family alive, kept your people intact, carried them through things that would have broken a lesser resolve. There should be reverence for that. The question is not whether they're right. The question is whether they still serve. Whether what was given to protect you in one era still fits the one you're living in now. whether strategies born from necessity are the only possibilities available to you now, and whether the things we do out of threat can be replaced with vision and imagination, something that stretches us rather than contracts us. I want to pause for a moment. Survival scripts often produce contraction. They narrow your focus. They are designed to get through the next spill, the next crisis, the next test, the next obstacle. And they work. They've kept us alive. But a life built entirely from that energy produces a certain kind of existence, one where the horizon never extends beyond the next thing that needs handling. So the question is, can the life you want, the one with room to breathe, to feel, to connect, to create, to belong, come from a script whose primary drive was to make it through? Live another day. Keep your head above water. Survival was never meant to be a permanent address. It was a bridge. The question is, what's on the other side? It doesn't have to be a good or bad dichotomy. It can be about growth, evolution, and choice. The guilt of choosing differently from a tradition that was forged in sacrifice is real, and it can feel heavy. It is what keeps so many of us holding on long after the script has stopped serving us. Naming the script is not betrayal. It's the beginning of honoring it fully by choosing to carry forward what still gives life and releasing what doesn't. Here's what I'd invite you to sit with. Not right now, after this episode. Maybe while you're driving, maybe before bed, or while having your morning cup of tea. Just let these land and notice what surfaces. When reflecting on what was passed down, what did your family teach you about what a good life looks like? Not what they said directly, what you absorbed, what was understood, what was so assumed it was never spoken out loud. Where did that picture come from? And is it still the picture you're building towards? Regarding the script still operating, what is something you've always done that you've never questioned whether you actually want? Something that feels so much like who you are that it's invisible. A way you work, a way you love, a way you sacrifice, a thing you chase. Sit with it for a moment. Now ask, where did that come from? Was it yours to begin with? Or did it arrive before you had the language to say yes or no? And what has the script created? When you look at the life you've built, what parts of it feel like they came from your own choosing? And what parts feel like they were already in motion before you got there? Not good or bad, just noticing. What has the script produced in your life? And what didn't get to happen because the script had you going somewhere else? And here's where the energy lives. What might you choose? What might you choose if no one from the past was watching? No one to disappoint, no one to prove wrong, no one to make proud, no one's burden to carry. What would you do differently? Not everything, just one thing. What would shift? The conversations this season are an opportunity for you to bring what we've been exploring in this episode with you as you listen. Each guest is generous in sharing their experiences and what has shaped them. As you listen, see what becomes familiar, not to judge, not to label, just to notice. Get familiar with how scripts sound, how they show up in a life, and what starts to shift when someone can see them. You may start to recognize some of your own, further growing your self-awareness. So the invitation continues to be to stay with us, and most importantly, to continue to stay self-centered. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Self-Centered Living. Come back next week as we continue exploring what shapes us and what wants to emerge. Our music is by Ketsu. Information on our participants can be found in the show notes. You can find me at selfcenteredliving.com. Take care until then.